Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Jason was sitting on the living room couch, holding a lukewarm cup of coffee. The aroma that used to comfort him seemed to have no effect that night. The TV was on, but he wasn't really watching. The day had been just like all the others, predictable and routine. Kelly, his wife, was in the bedroom, apparently getting ready for bed. At least that's what he assumed. Nothing about that night hinted that anything out of the ordinary was about to happen. A firm knock at the door echoed through the house, interrupting his scattered thoughts. Jason glanced at the clock on the wall. It was after 9. Who could it be at this hour? He got up slowly, confused, and walked over to the door, peering through the peephole. On the other side stood a man he'd never seen before, impeccably dressed in a black suit that looked like it came straight from a fashion magazine. He held a bouquet of flowers in one hand and wore a confident smile. Jason opened the door with hesitation. "Good evening. Can I help you?" he asked, trying to mask his surprise. The man, in a calm but certain tone of voice, replied, "Good evening. I'm here to pick up Kelly." Jason blinked, thinking he'd misheard. "Excuse me, what?" he repeated, trying to process the situation. Before the man could respond, Kelly appeared in the hallway, wearing a dress Jason hadn't seen her wear in months. She looked radiant, as if she'd gotten ready for a special evening. "Kelly, what's going on?" Jason's confusion was palpable. He felt the floor shift under his feet. Kelly, holding a small purse, looked him in the eye without looking away. "Jason, I'm going out. I'm tired of living the same routine day after day. I need something different. I need to feel alive." Her voice wasn't aggressive, but it had a firmness he didn't recognize. Jason froze for a moment, trying to figure out if this was really happening. "You're telling me you're going out with him?" He pointed at the stranger still standing at the door, now with an almost indifferent expression. Kelly took a deep breath and answered, "Yes. I warned you so many times that I wasn't happy, but you never listened." A mix of shock, anger, and disbelief washed over Jason. He tried to argue, but words seemed to slip away. "Kelly, we're married. This isn't just some casual outing. It's cheating," he finally managed to say, but she only shook her head. "This is an attempt to save something that's already gone, Jason. I didn't want it to be like this, but I can't keep pretending." The man stepped back, making room for Kelly to pass. Jason felt the urge to stop her but remained frozen, as if held back by invisible chains. Kelly walked past him without hesitation, leaving behind the soft scent of perfume he'd always loved. She turned briefly at the door, as if she were going to say something, but then changed her mind. The sound of her heels descending the steps echoed at the entrance as Jason stayed there, motionless, watching. The door closed with a sharp click, and the silence that followed seemed louder than any scream. Jason stood there alone, staring at the empty space where his wife had been just seconds before. The night, which had started like so many others, now held a mark that would change everything forever. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, staring into space while the clock's hands moved painfully slowly. Each minute felt heavier than the last. The silence in the house, which once meant tranquility, now felt like a cruel reminder of Kelly's absence. Her words rang in his mind like a hammer, "I need to feel alive." He didn't know whether he felt anger, sadness, or sheer despair. The next morning, still in shock, Jason tried to get back to his routine. He got dressed for work, but the emotional weight was clear in his tired eyes and slow movements. He wondered if he should call Kelly, demand answers, or just wait for her to come back. But when he checked the bank app on his phone to pay some bills, he was hit by something even more devastating. The balance in their joint account had dropped drastically. More than half of their money was gone. He gripped his phone tightly, stunned, as if that alone might bring the money back. Scrolling through the transaction history, he found the source of the problem, a transfer to an account he didn't recognize. The transfer had been made that same night, right before Kelly left. A cold shiver ran down his spine. She'd taken the money. It wasn't just a night out to clear her head or a cry for attention, it felt like a complete betrayal. Jason took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He immediately called the bank to block any more transfers, but they told him that because it was a joint account, Kelly had the legal right to move the money. The operator on the other end of the line sounded almost indifferent to the pain Jason was feeling. He thanked them mechanically and hung up, feeling powerless. For a few minutes, Jason sat on the couch, unmoving. His mind raced with scenarios of anger and sadness. He tried to find some explanation for what Kelly had done. Had she been planning this for a long time? Was the man she went out with involved? He knew he needed to do something, but all those conflicting emotions made it hard to think clearly. Determined to protect what was left, Jason started taking practical steps. He canceled their shared credit cards and moved the remaining money into an account in his name only. He went to his insurance company's website and changed the beneficiaries on his policies, removing Kelly from all of them. Then he called a lawyer a coworker had recommended a few months earlier. He never thought he'd need that contact, but now it was a matter of survival. The lawyer advised him to gather all financial documents and be ready to start divorce proceedings. While Jason was dealing with that avalanche of problems, Kelly was somewhere else, believing her actions were a clear sign that their marriage needed attention. She had no idea of the emotional and financial damage she'd caused. In her mind, everything could be settled with an honest conversation at the right time. But Jason, hurt and wary, was already heading in another direction. In the days that followed, Jason started reflecting on the signs he'd ignored over the years. Little comments, distant looks, subtle changes in Kelly's behavior. Everything made sense now. He felt a mix of guilt for not seeing it earlier and anger that she hadn't been honest. If she was so unhappy, why didn't she say anything? He asked himself over and over, hoping an answer would magically appear. The emptiness in the house was overwhelming, but Jason filled it with action. He organized paperwork, sought legal advice, and tried to move forward. Still, the pain lingered. At night, when the silence became deafening, he'd find himself looking at the empty side of the bed, fighting the urge to grab the phone and call Kelly. But he knew he couldn't. Something inside him had changed, and he wasn't sure there was any going back. Jason was exhausted that night. Work at the office had been especially intense, and the lonely days were starting to weigh on him more than he'd anticipated. He stopped at the grocery store, bought something quick to eat, and headed to his car. His routine felt mechanical, without any real purpose or emotion. While driving through the dark streets toward home, his mind wandered, full of tangled thoughts about the upcoming divorce, Kelly, and all the choices that led him here. It had started raining a few minutes earlier, turning the pavement into a slick mirror. Distracted, Jason adjusted the windshield wipers while listening to the rhythmic sound of raindrops hitting the car's roof. The radio played a sad tune that matched his mood. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice the yellow light ahead. He sped up, trying to get through before it turned red, but he didn't see the other car barreling through the perpendicular intersection. The collision was sudden and violent. The sound of metal crashing, glass shattering, and Jason's muffled scream filled the air. His car was shoved to the side, spinning around twice before coming to a stop in the middle of the street. Time seemed to slow for a few moments, and then everything went silent. Jason slumped against the steering wheel, held in place by his seatbelt, blood trickling from his head after hitting the dashboard. Nearby drivers stopped to help, some calling emergency services, others rushing toward the car to check for survivors. Jason was unconscious, and the smell of gasoline mixed with the fresh rain filled the air. Sirens began echoing in the distance, growing louder as they approached. Paramedics arrived quickly and found Jason still breathing but unresponsive. They carefully pulled him from the vehicle and placed him on a stretcher. One of them, checking his vital signs, confirmed everyone's worst fear: Jason had a severe head injury. They rushed him to the hospital, where the medical team raced against time to stabilize him. Meanwhile, Kelly was at home, reflecting on the past few weeks. She had begun to question her own actions, wondering if there was still time to fix what she'd broken. The insistent ringing of her phone interrupted her thoughts. She answered, not recognizing the number, but the urgent voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Kelly, this is about Jason. He was in a bad car accident and he's at the hospital. You should come." Kelly left home in a hurry, heart pounding, unsure what she was about to face. When she arrived, the cold, chaotic atmosphere of the ER surrounded her. Doctors and nurses dashed back and forth, while families of other patients waited anxiously for news. She went up to the reception desk and explained who she was. "Jason Miller. My husband. He was in an accident," she said, almost out of breath. The receptionist checked the system quickly and directed her to a nearby waiting room outside the ICU. Kelly sat there, restless, the anxiety building up. Minutes felt like hours until a doctor approached. He looked serious but calm. "Kelly, your husband is stable but in critical condition. He suffered a head trauma and is in a coma. We did everything we could to stabilize him, but what happens next depends on how his body responds." Those words hit Kelly hard. With a gentle gesture, the doctor led her to the room where Jason lay. When she walked in, she felt a lump in her throat. Jason, usually so strong and certain of himself, looked unrecognizable lying there, surrounded by machines monitoring his vital signs. A bandage was wrapped around his head, and bruises were visible on his face. Kelly approached slowly, hesitant. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she finally reached his bedside, she held out her hand but hesitated before touching him. "Jason," her voice came out in a whisper. She wanted to say so many things but had no idea where to begin. Guilt weighed on her. She remembered the past few weeks, the words she'd said, the coldness with which she'd left home. And now he was here, unconscious, not even aware that she'd come. She sat down next to him and finally held his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin. "I never wanted this. I never wanted things to end up like this." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, not knowing if he could hear her. The sound of the machines filled the room, making the moment feel even heavier. A nurse came in to adjust the monitors and looked at Kelly with understanding. "You can stay as long as you need. He's being well taken care of. We're watching him closely." Kelly nodded in thanks, knowing those words didn't really ease the weight on her heart. At that moment, Kelly realized how much her impulsive actions had pushed them apart. Jason, who'd always sought stability and order, was now stuck in a situation where everything was beyond his control. She wondered if she'd get the chance to say everything she was feeling or if this silence would be the last memory he had of her. Night fell as Kelly stayed by his side, watching for any sign that he might wake up. She knew time wasn't on their side, but all she could do was sit there, holding his hand, hoping he was strong enough to come back. The days passed in a heavy fog. Kelly stayed at the hospital, visiting Jason every day, even though he showed no signs of waking. The ICU had strict rules, but she made sure to use every minute she was allowed by his side. Sitting in an uncomfortable chair, holding his hand, Kelly spoke softly, not knowing if he could hear. "I'm so sorry, Jason. I never wanted things to get this bad." Her voice often cracked under the tears she tried to hold back. But the truth was that Jason's silence hurt more than any words he could have thrown at her. There were no answers, just the constant beeping of machines around them. While Kelly replayed past moments in her head, drowning in regret, the medical team worked tirelessly to keep Jason stable. His head trauma required extreme care, but the prognosis was uncertain. Each test came back with the same conclusion: only time would tell. One afternoon, just as Kelly was about to enter his room again, a doctor asked her to come talk in a private room. They sat down on opposite sides of a small table. His expression was neutral, but with the seriousness she already recognized. "Kelly, we need to talk about Jason's condition. He's staying stable, which is a good sign. However, there's something important you need to know." He paused, as if searching for the right words. "When he wakes up, there's a chance he could have some level of amnesia. It's common with head trauma. It could be temporary or permanent, and we won't know until he regains consciousness." It felt like a punch to the gut. Kelly could almost feel the ground dropping out from under her feet. "He might not remember me?" she asked, her voice wavering. The doctor kept his calm tone but didn't soften the truth. "It's a possibility. He might not remember recent events, like the accident, or even close family and friends. We have to be prepared for that." Kelly left the room feeling more vulnerable than ever. The thought that Jason might not recognize her was devastating. At the same time, a tiny part of her wondered if this could be a chance to start over. Maybe he'd forget the fights, the painful moments, the words that hurt him. Maybe they could rewrite their story. A few days later, as Kelly sat by his bed, something unexpected happened. Jason moved his fingers. It was such a slight movement that she almost missed it, but when she realized what had happened, her heart raced. "Jason?" She leaned closer, holding his hand more firmly. His fingers moved again, and she saw his eyes begin to open. It was a brief moment, but it was full of hope. Jason blinked a few times, his eyes still unfocused, as if trying to figure out where he was. Kelly quickly called for a nurse, who came in and checked him. "This is a good sign," the nurse said, smiling encouragingly. "He's coming back." But when Jason finally focused on Kelly, something was off. He looked at her like she was a stranger. "Who are you?" His voice was low and slow, but the effect on Kelly was immediate. Her heart seemed to stop for a second. She tried to stay calm, though her pain showed. "Jason, it's me, Kelly. Your wife." He frowned, like he was trying to piece together an invisible puzzle. "Wife?" he repeated, confused. It was as if that word had no meaning for him. The nurse stepped in, asking Kelly to remain calm and explaining to Jason where he was and what had happened. But the look in his eyes was still blank, as though all the connections in his mind had been severed. Kelly left the room soon after, legs trembling. She sank into a chair in the hallway, trying to process what had just happened. He really didn't recognize her. The memories they'd shared, everything they'd been through, now seemed wiped away. While part of her felt the weight of that loss, another part saw it as a new challenge. She wasn't going to give up on him. Even if Jason no longer remembered who she was, Kelly was determined to show him she could still matter in his life. In the following days, Jason slowly regained consciousness. However, his memory was still full of gaps and missing pieces. He recognized familiar faces, but major details of his life, including his relationship with Kelly, remained clouded. To him, she was just a woman who was always around but didn't spark any emotional connection or clear memory. Kelly, however, tried to stay strong. Even though every encounter reminded her that he didn't remember her, she kept trying to create meaningful moments. She brought books he used to love, played music they used to listen to together, and even showed him old vacation photos of them. But each attempt was met with polite indifference, like he was interacting with a distant friend, not his wife. One day, while sitting on his hospital bed, Jason was holding one of those photos Kelly had brought. It showed them at the beach, laughing as they held ice cream cones. He stared at it for a long time, trying to force his mind to recall something. But no matter how hard he tried, all he felt was frustrating emptiness. "You look so happy here," he said, handing the photo back to Kelly. His voice had no emotion, just curiosity. "I wish I could remember that." Kelly smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "It was a special day," she said, putting the photo back in her bag. "But we don't have to force anything. We can make new memories when you're ready." Her words were full of hope, but she knew that creating new memories wouldn't erase old wounds. While Jason focused on his physical recovery, he also began questioning who he'd been before the accident. Without his recent memories, he felt like an empty slate, with a chance to start over. But when he discovered some divorce papers Kelly had brought to the hospital, his uncertainty grew. "Why was I divorcing you?" he asked, sounding both curious and cautious. Kelly froze. She knew this moment was coming, but she still wasn't prepared. "It's complicated," she began, choosing her words carefully. "We were going through a hard time, but it doesn't matter right now. What matters is you getting better." Jason didn't press the issue, but her vague explanation only fueled his doubt. A few days later, Jason was discharged. He still needed physical therapy and medical follow-ups, but he was eager to leave the hospital and get back to his life, whatever that was now. Kelly brought him home, but the atmosphere felt strange for both of them. The house that used to be a couple's home now felt cold and unfamiliar. Jason walked around the rooms like a visitor, touching items that once had meaning but were now just decorations. On that first night back, while Kelly cooked dinner, Jason watched her from the living room. He couldn't ignore something about her, a mix of pain, regret, and determination that intrigued him. He wanted to trust her, but something told him to keep a bit of distance. After all, they'd been in the process of getting divorced for a reason, right? After dinner, Kelly sat next to him on the couch. The silence between them was heavy, but Jason finally spoke. "I feel like there's something you're not telling me, Kelly. Something important." She took a deep breath, knowing he was right. It was time to face reality. "Jason," she began, her voice trembling. "I made bad choices. I pulled away from you, and I did things that hurt you. I thought I was looking for something that was missing in our lives, but all I ended up doing was losing everything." She didn't go into details, not wanting to overwhelm him further, but her words carried genuine remorse. Jason looked at her for a long moment, trying to read her emotions. "I don't know how I feel about all of this," he admitted. "But I want to try to understand. I want to know who I was, who we were." There was a vulnerability in his voice that gave Kelly a glimmer of hope, but she knew any path to reconciliation would be a long one. Over the following weeks, Jason worked on rebuilding his life piece by piece. He returned to work part-time, revisited hobbies he used to enjoy, and even made some new friends. Kelly stayed close but didn't force her presence on him. She understood that she needed to earn his trust again, not based on their shared history, but on the person she was now. One sunny afternoon, as Jason was going through some files in his home office, he found an old letter tucked away in a drawer. It was from Kelly, written during a rough patch in their marriage. In it, she confessed her fears, insecurities, and, most of all, her love for him. As he read her words, Jason felt something stir inside him. It wasn't exactly a memory, but more of a feeling, like an echo of who he used to be and who he could still become. That night, he went out to the garden, where Kelly was sitting, gazing at the sky. Jason held the letter in his hand. "I found this," he said in a softer voice than she expected. Kelly looked at him, surprised, but before she could speak, he went on. "I don't remember writing my part of this story, but I want to try now. Maybe I can write it today." Kelly smiled, and for the first time in a while, she felt there was a real chance. It wasn't an easy or perfect new beginning, but it was a start, more than she could have hoped for. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.